Good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks to all of you for joining us today. I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're keeping safe. As you can see, this is the first webinar that we've now done back at the office, albeit at a limited capacity for the time being. And I'm excited today to be able to discuss the new report that we published earlier this week. In the midst of everything that's been happening, we've continued to try and aggregate the data and information on the venture space here in the region. And this week we launched our H1 MENA Venture Snapshot and the full report on our website. And really, against the backdrop of COVID-19, it's been fascinating to try and understand what's been happening from a venture perspective. Clearly, there are more important things going on in terms of safety and health, but in the space that we're in, people keep asking, are people investing? What are governments doing? And how are founders surviving during this environment? And I'm genuinely honored and excited to have Fadi joining us today. He doesn't require an introduction. The only introduction I repeat from a couple of years ago is he's effectively the godfather of the startup ecosystem here, with the huge experience that he's already got from Aramex, but also through the experience of Wamda, both the platform and the venture fund. And I have always wanted to have him join us with MAGNiTT to discuss the ecosystem, and no better opportune time than now with everything that's happening to get his views. Before we jump into the discussion, I just wanted to provide a little bit of a backdrop based on some of the findings that we had from this year's report to give some context. So again, this is completely free to download the snapshot on the website. And what we've seen in the first 6 months of this year is some very interesting figures. So this chart is one that we publish every report, which is the evolution of funding in the startup ecosystem here in the region. What you effectively have is the red bar being the total amount of disclosed funding that has been invested in MENA-based startups. The gray figure, which is our undisclosed proxy, i.e. people who have said that they've made undisclosed investments, but we've applied averages by stage and year. And this black number, which I'm very happy to say is now called mega deals, historically investments in Kareem and Souk, but now seeing investments that are $100 million plus. And what you've effectively seen is the total amount of capital deployed in the first 6 months of this year is approximately 95% of the total amount of funding in 2019. Year over year, I think that's a 35% increase, but you've also seen about an 8% drop year over year in the number of deals. Again, when you look at it by quarter, so we've removed the mega deals from this chart, Q1 was a historical record quarter for investments in MENA-based startups. Now, again, you could argue, and I will caveat all discussion here, that much of the impact of COVID-19 is likely to only hit in terms of venture investments in Q3 and Q4. We know that on average, it takes 9 to 12 months for rounds to be raised, the term sheets to be agreed, due diligence to be done. So anything that was done in Q1, including the mega deals that we saw, or the likes of Visita, Seleni Car, MAGNiTT, have likely been months in the making. But despite that, we did see two interesting trends reflected in Q2. April and May were down year over year about 60%, but June was up about 50%. One trend that we particularly saw was a complete collapse in the number of accelerator investments, i.e. startups that have gone through accelerator programs, down about 35% year over year. And I would like to discuss that more with Fadi as we discuss the impact of accelerator programs not being able to provide the pipeline of deals for the future. In terms of country, I mean, across the region, we're definitely seeing different shifts. Egypt continued to maintain itself as the country that saw the most investments by number of deals, closely followed by the UAE. But Saudi Arabia was the fastest growing after Oman, which saw several investments that were made through their accelerator programs and different government investment vehicles at the beginning of the year. Interestingly, and again, I'll be discussing this with Fadi, Lebanon saw a 75% drop in investments. Clearly, there is a massive situation that's happening there, but the startup ecosystem as well is being affected. With regards to the total amount of funding, UAE maintains its lion's share, albeit dropping year over year, but Egypt and KSA year over year saw a 100% increase in their individual funding amounts, definitely supporting the overall figure, taking up almost some of the slack from other ecosystem investments across the region. With regards to industries, fintech maintains its dominance in terms of the industry that saw the most investments by number of deals, while we also saw e-commerce and delivery and transport continue to see investment deals. The chart is not here, but I did the analysis. In those COVID impacted industries where there were increases of revenue, you saw even close to 300% increase in the case of food and beverage, as well as ed tech and health tech, but they didn't make the top industries relative to all the others, except for food and beverage. Real estate here is somewhat skewed by total amount of funding because of the big investment by OLX in Beirut or EMPG, the parent company. It's interesting when you look at the investor and accelerator rank, there was 140 different institutions across the region, internationally and in the region, that made investments in MENA-based startups, accelerators, investors, corporate venture capital, and the likes. Interestingly, two facts: 30% of them plus came from outside of the MENA region, and 30% of them had never previously made investments in MENA-based startups, so were first-time investors despite the current situation. And the top 5 funding rounds, which were EMPG, Kitopi, Visita, Jahez, Selenikar, accounted for 50% of the $656 million. Therefore, somewhat skewed by large mega deals. In fact, one of the trends that I'll be discussing now is that we've seen investors making larger investments in more established startups than riskier investments at the earlier stage. And 3 out of 5 of these were in Q1 at the beginning of the year. Just to round up, just to announce to everybody, MAGNiTT has now launched new solutions, which I'll be sharing in the summary email afterwards. And we have a promo code for everybody that's on the call to benefit from the new subscription models that we have on the platform. I'm now going to have the pleasure of inviting Fadi to join me, and I will ask him to open his exactly. Perfect. Thank you very much, Fadi. Great to see you. Loving the image behind you. I hope you're keeping well, and I hope you're keeping safe.
I'm well and safe, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Philip, and congratulations on the report. It's quite interesting. I'm very much looking forward to discussing the details and what we can add to what you've just disclosed, actually.
Thank you very much. I mean, off the bat, is there anything that particularly surprised you, or any insights that you thought were counterintuitive or actually quite predictable from what we shared?
No, look, I was happy, Philip, seeing a continuity. I mean, there are no drastic results that would worry me. Having Egypt with the most, having the UAE there is a continuation of what we've been saying. Egypt is coming back strongly, which I've been expecting. I think you will see Egypt actually doing much more going forward. It's been super busy, but the crisis stopped everything for a while, but I think you'll see it coming back. I think Saudi Arabia is going to be a fantastic growth market. You're going to see a lot happening in Saudi Arabia. It's the largest market in the region, and there's more money going into it, and it's a natural that you're going to get that. So, and seeing this number of
I think, Fadi, I think your connection may be dropping.
deals. I mean, it's natural. This is you're going to see it and see it. Is that better now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Sorry, I think it just cut slightly.
Yeah, sorry about that. I am in an internet where the internet is not as good as it should be. So my apologies to you and to the listeners.
No, not at all.
So I'm just saying that seed stage and early stage are natural to be the most. I mean, that's we're still in the early days in our region, and there is much more to happen. So, yeah.
And so the point about accelerator programs, is it a concern or is it not a concern that potentially this
No.
pipeline deal that's stunted?
No, I think it's too early for us to deduct anything out of it, really, Philip. Let's keep the faith. I think the accelerator stuff is a result. You know, you have to remember it's been 4 months in Corona, 4 or 5 months. So I mean, I will not draw any conclusions out of it. I'll leave it at that. It's not a concern to me.
So we've had many discussions on this. We're both very fortunate, well, at least myself, to be on the Dubai Future Council, and we've discussed what it is that governments can be doing to support startups. We brought out a report last week with INSEAD. 77% of the startups surveyed had said that they have yet to be able to necessarily benefit from a government policy or initiative to support them. And yet we understand the importance of safety, the importance of health, and there are clearly priorities that come before necessarily startups. But in the conversations that we're having, where do you think that there is a role for government to support? Again, it's not one size fits all across the whole of MENA. Each geography is a bit different. But in your experience, like, where is there something that can be done to help startup founders?
Look, in startups and SMEs, let's say. I mean, SMEs got hit more than startups because they're in a lot of them are in the bricks and mortar world. Governments in some countries did step up. I mean, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in other countries, there were, in the UAE even, you know, the central banks came out and said delay payments. There were some programs, nothing earth-shattering. So I have to tell you, salary protection programs, furlough programs, cash flow supporting programs in delays in VATs or in utilities did not happen. And I'm one that says, you know, that's when government steps in. That's a long discussion. I would think government should look at this as an investment because these companies, once they stick around, they build businesses, they employ, they become consumers, they eventually pay taxes again. So and this is not a charity, really. This is an investment in the long-term staying power of companies that are hurt today. Corona is not the making of the private sector. Corona is a global challenge. We have never seen anything like it. In my view, governments should step in and should actually create the safety net and should view supporting startups and SMEs as a strategic view, because that's where the future, specifically in tech, you know, tech is building the next economy in the region. And if anything that taught us in Corona lockdowns is that these tech companies were our heroes. They kept us in connection with the rest of the world, whether it's Zoom now, whether it's the last mile companies, whether it's the grocery companies, whether it is the e-commerce companies, whether it's the pharmacies that became online. Those who invested in these companies and those entrepreneurs that built them are visionaries. They were core to our existence. So I would hope that there's more investment in it. Yeah. And I'd hope government, if not investing, facilitate. Let's talk about loan guarantees. Let's talk about all sorts of programs, encouraging outside investors to come in, regulators easing the environment so that the government has many levers of power. It's not only about cash. It's about ease of doing business.
On that specifically, I mean, we all know, and you probably advocate more than any, that a startup is only as good as the team that they have. And there's been a lot of talk now on two things. One, is there going to be a mass exodus of people from the region because all of a sudden there's going to be a lack of talent from people? Or the flip side of it is there an opportunity here to import new talent to the region to help support startups? What is the situation with talent, and what role can government definitely play in helping facilitate keeping, if not hiring?
Philip, I don't want to paint a rosy picture, but I'll give you a balance here. I think on the short run, there is going to be a lot of pain. So there'll be pain, people will go, there might be some exodus of expatriates in certain places. It's inevitable. There has been a lot of hurt here. But in my view, and I think in many other people's view, is that what this massive experiment of shutdown, this massive experiment of testing the internet, this massive experiment that got everyone to be aware how essential it is to be digitally enabled, this next generation of people is going to build the next economy. And there is no debate around it anymore. You know, you and I have been around for a while. I've probably been, I have a much whiter hair than you do.
It's not yet.
And I'll tell you, look, there were a lot of skeptics, or there were a lot of people that were delaying, a lot of traditional businesses that were saying, okay, we will be digitally enabled in the future. It is a luxury, not a core. Well, now everyone understands that being digitally enabled, selling online, transacting online, being online, no matter what business you are in, is strategic. It is vital to your existence. And so, in my view, short-term pain, long-term massive gain. There are going to be massive, massive opportunities. We need to be patient. We need to look at this in the coming 5 years rather than in the coming 2 years. I think, you know, it might be, some people might say I'm insensitive, but this thing is an opportunity. This experiment, which we would have never dreamed of ever, in having everyone shut down and testing the digital landscape, has basically accelerated everything that we've been calling for, you and I, and we wanted it to happen in 10 years. It's suddenly sitting in our laps now. We are looking at it right now. No, you don't need to hire any consultant, Philip, you know.
Thankfully.
COVID told us. COVID announced it.
Yes, for sure. But let's, before I move on to another subject, I mean, what can we all collectively do to support Lebanese startups? I mean, the situation in Lebanon is not ideal for many of them for different reasons. And yet we have these emerging hubs across the region who are looking for startups to come. And you have this ecosystem that is clearly in need of help. Is there any message that we can give out? I mean, I have my own views. It's almost like you can import the ecosystem until it comes back. I don't want to say that Lebanon should be deprived of its entrepreneurial ecosystem, but clearly there is an opportunity now to really help these guys access new markets and to continue to grow. Do you have a particular view or opinion on this?
I have. I follow the Lebanese scene quite well, not only in the startup scene, not in the digital landscape only, but in general, politically, economically, etc. I think Lebanon, unfortunately now, I can say that it's a dysfunctional country. It's a dollarized economy. It suddenly is off the dollar. The Lebanese pound is dropping drastically. It was about 5,000 pounds to the dollar just about 10 days ago. It's about 10,000 today, and continuing to drop. The government is not doing anything. The big program of 331, unfortunately, is gone. I mean, it has very little effect. I think until there is stability economically and politically in Lebanon, which is going to take some time, I think the ecosystem has to be put on hold. It is on hold. What can benefit, and so that we don't lose, Lebanon doesn't lose its talent. It doesn't migrate. There is a cost element to being in Lebanon today. There is huge talent. The talent is much more affordable today if we are able to bring in capital, and that's a big problem because there's fresh dollars, there's old dollars, there's new dollars, it's just confusing now. And investors are not the biggest risk takers on earth, even though venture is a risk, the riskiest of them all. But until there is political and economic stability and visibility on where the currency is going to land and how the economy and the political system is going to look like, I don't see, even the Lebanese are not going to be investing. And so I unfortunately have to say it's in deep freeze for now. Okay. And that's the reality.
Is it, so moving on, I mean, if I'm correct, Wamda's made seven investments during this period of this year. I mean, what in your discussions with startups have you seen in terms of any mind shift, or have these investments, as I already said, been months in the making and therefore there wasn't too much change? Are you seeing what's your perception basically?
Here's what I'm seeing. We're seeing massive pipeline, Philip. So there is, I can tell you, your report says it, but I'll tell you as being on the receiving end, we get massive pipeline, 2 to 3 pitches a day literally. So that is a continuation of what we've been seeing. We're seeing fintech, we're seeing edtech, we're seeing e-commerce, we're seeing last mile, we're seeing everything that you have staged in the report. Are we investing? I think there are much earlier stage companies. We're watching, right? Even though there's dry powder, we want to invest. Most of our investments were, as you said, from previous. We have done some investments that were not announced because the companies did not want to announce, and they were probably in the periphery of the region, like Turkey, which you don't follow anyway. So
it's coming. It's coming next month.
It's coming, and you should be. It's a really important market for us because they also look for our region, and there's a lot to be learned on both sides of that divide. But I'll tell you, opportunities continue to be there. We've invested, and we've been firefighting a little bit with our startups. So those that needed cash, some of them did not announce, so they had bridge rounds just to keep stretch their cash for the next 12 months, so that they're able to do raises. Some of them were not to do, were in the middle of a raise, and then send everybody. When you're in the middle of a raise, in the middle of the lockdown, everybody pulls back. So you needed to come in and actually help a lot of LPs, a lot of funds, a lot of companies, a lot of investors were actually busy advancing some cash flow to our companies, the good companies that were doing superbly well but got hurt in the short run. So I think, you know, the community came together fantastically, I have to tell you, Philip. Not a single company that I've seen yet. I mean, some companies should die, in my view, that don't have the fundamentals, but the good companies all had their LPs and their I keep calling them LPs, their investors come through to them and bridge them so that they're able to raise when raising happens, really with significance.
So I'm on a whole bunch of group chats and Facebook groups with founders sharing help, insights, documents, whatever they can get during this period. Have you seen the investor community rally together to try and find solutions, or have people been more isolated and working in their own silos during this period? And is there a responsibility of the investor community to also advise governments on what needs to be done? Because our startups can only do so much. Are you seeing that rally?
We do that, Philip. Believe me.
I know you do it. I help you with it. But
I have a loud voice. I have a very loud voice. I'm not shy. You will see that on our Wamda platform once in a while. I do write a couple of pieces just to remind everyone of what I think should be done. And whoever asks me, and I get asked, I will tell my opinion very clearly that governments should step in and we should help these people. Again, I'm interested not only in tech, I mean, even though I'm a techie, but I'm interested in keeping the SMEs alive. I'm also invested in the MSE world separately. You don't hear about it, but I am. And I know the pain over there. There is much more pain in the real bricks and mortar SMEs than there is in the tech SMEs. There is, you know,
Dubai Chamber of Commerce said 70% of companies in the US. Exactly.
Huge. And that's only, you're talking Dubai. I mean, this is across the board. There is, you know, people that got hurt because of the lockdown, shops, restaurants, you know, beauty salons. I mean, all of these people are entrepreneurs, really. I mean, they're not building earth-shattering businesses, but they earn a living and they hire people. And so they got hurt. And I don't see that the governments came in superbly over there. Some governments did, I'll tell you, in some of the regions, but nothing that that gives me that view that we've seen in Germany, we've seen in the UK, we've seen in the US. I mean, there were programs. We need to see similar programs here.
But to the point of the investor community rallying together in discussions, are you seeing that happen? Okay.
We did, Philip. We did. We talked. We came through, at least the companies I'm involved in, and we have, you know, there's a good number of companies we're in. I mean, we see the ecosystem quite well, and anybody that needed help, people came through. I haven't seen anyone that has a viable business, Philip, and that's doing well, but got hurt temporarily, that their shareholders did not come through to them. Some had to cut down on costs. Some had to everyone had to manage frugally. I mean, and that's the lesson of this crisis: is you manage frugally. You have to be responsible. And everybody pitches in. The employees pitch in, the founders pitch in, and the investors come and become part of the story.
So for the founders on this call, that's an interesting point, right? So venture tends to be hyper growth, exponential growth. And this crisis has definitely all of a sudden made us genuinely realize the importance of cash flow, profitability. Is there going to be, in your opinion, a shift in mindset in the region towards more sustainable businesses as opposed to hyper growth, or will it always be a balance between the two?
I have two insights for you here. One, the biggest, most of my lessons, look, as you know, I'm more of a manager and a CEO and the founder of a company than I am an investor. If you look at my career of 40 years, I'm close to my 40 years in business, Philip. So my first 30 years, everything I learned in Aramex, everything, and believe me, I'm saying everything, was built around crisis, right?
Yeah.
The continuation of running frugally, being very careful, investing where it matters, taking care of my people, taking care of the investors, watching out for the stakeholders, having a macro view of things where a result of a crisis. Unfortunately, we live in a region that has crisis all the time, right? So, I mean, this COVID brought us all in one crisis, but, you know, there was Iraq, there was a Lebanon civil war, there was a first Gulf War, there was a
Palestine,
war, there was Syria. So, you know, and I did business in Aramex in all of these countries, and we learned so many lessons. I would tell every founder, you'd better stick to these lessons that you've learned and how you run your business frugally today. How you care more about your where every dollar goes, how you spend every dollar, how you treat your people. People will remember, and you should remember how you ran your business in this crisis and take those lessons and carry them forward, because they will be a huge benefit for you. So that's essential. Number two, and a lot of founders really came through. I spoke to every single founder all the time. And I was ringing the bells and raising flags, watch it, because I've seen, you know, when the flood, when you spend too many times in floods, you will know when the flood is coming, right? So I had my flag up very early and said, it's coming. So, and they came through. The second lesson is this blitz scaling, grow at any cost, is dead. And you'd better think it's dead. I don't like it. I never liked it. It confused the fuck. Excuse my language. It's confused.
The line cut, the internet cut. Don't worry.
I'm sorry about that.
It's good. I love the passion. Love the passion. The internet cut. It's fine.
I'm an old guy. I am allowed one mistake, right? So
absolutely, you can have as many as you like.
My apologies for that. But the reality of the matter is, we are blitzscaling doesn't work, and unlimited amount of money from investors is not going to happen. And we saw what happened outside of the region before COVID. In COVID, it's confirming it. Focus on your fundamentals. It's not saying don't grow. It's saying look at ways on how you can grow differently, and your valuation is no longer about a multiple only of your revenue. If you grow, and you know, don't care about anything else, whoever gives that advice today is a dangerous person and should be told to not say anything. Number three, I have to tell you, is you know, we're invested heavily in e-commerce, and e-commerce is showing cash flow positive now. The adoption, the growth, you know, maybe we were at around 5% of commercial, of consumer commerce. I think we're about 10-15% now. It's growing. You're having to market less. You're having to advertise less. Your cost of acquisition, your CAC is going down. I'll tell you, a couple of companies I know well are actually making net income. They're continuing to grow 50-60%. And they are profitable at the bottom line. So which means these businesses actually will make money. Will make money.
It's a massive positive.
And I am super optimistic about this. Lastly, you're going to see a new set of things that happen in last mile also, and how they think about their unit economics, because last mile also was such an essential element in our existence. So I'm seeing good stuff. I think there's lots of lessons to be learned here.
I want to make sure that if people want to ask questions, please throw in the questions in the Q&A and we'll come to them in a couple of minutes. Before we get there, I mean, so us as founders are always thinking about what our investors are thinking about in the current environment. You guys as investors, what are your LPs? What is the LP you've put in? And I really admire for the energy that you've put into building this ecosystem here in the region, almost from scratch. And yet a lot of acceleration has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. Something like this could potentially halt that growth and create a little bit of a stunt. What are the LPs and governments and investors or corporates and family offices saying in the current environment? Are they just imagining this to be a slight pause, or is this going to be a cause for concern?
I would hope it's a pause where they're doing triage. They are looking at the hurt, because a lot of the family offices have their own businesses also, you remember.
Yeah.
So these businesses are a bit hurt now. So they stopped the family office was the extra money that they didn't need in their core business, but maybe now they need some in their core business. So they will hold. But because the digital landscape is the next promise, I would hope that they're just halting now and looking backwards and looking at what damage there was. And once they realize the damage, once they understand it, once they start fixing it, and then they go back to normal investing. But you will still see people who have dry powder and want to invest, and you will see people who are visionaries and saw it and said, yes, we're going to go into this and we're going to do more. But for now, what I am seeing is a bit of a pause, Not everyone is pausing, but and I think it's okay to do that. It's okay. People need to know what's happening. People need to absorb the lessons. People need to absorb the pain. There is pain.
We did the survey last week said that 58% of MENA investors are looking to delay exits in their companies until potentially valuations move back in their favor. How do you think that's going to affect the investor and founder mindset? Is that going to be a slight halt or delay in progress of the ecosystem, or is that just a part and parcel of the
I didn't hear
situation?
the first part. You were saying people were worried about that the valuations went down?
No, 58% of MENA investors are looking to delay the exits of their companies. So there's a slight kind of, we need to wait a few more years before these exits happen. Is that a cause for concern or not?
Yeah. No. And it's naturally that you're going to see, I think there are good deals now coming up at more modest valuations. Founders are smart not to exit now, because this is not a good time for exits. I mean, valuations are not going to be great. I've seen some companies who were doing superbly well and continue to do well in the crisis. But investors want to take an opportunity and say, well, yes, I don't like your valuation.
Yes.
And so people have becoming more modest about their valuation. And so my view of it is raise a bit less, continue growing your business, and then look for the next big story down the road, because not now. You're not going to have your valuations now.
But potentially a good time for M&A.
Do you want me to repeat? Yeah.
But potentially a good time for M&A. I mean, in so much as
yes.
If companies are struggling, you can be a stronger company together than doing it alone.
Yeah. And I would think that people and the big families that were in the bricks and mortar businesses should look at this as an opportunity. I mean, this is the way for them to get into digital very quickly, rather than build it from scratch. There are plenty of companies out there, plenty of talents that you can look at. Look at it. If not acquisitions, M&A, substantial tickets, so that you have an influence inside these companies, or you can be part of the future, or you can look at this M&A down the road, but book a ticket now.
Yeah. And just before we go into some of the questions, looking forwards, midterm, end of year 2020, longer term 21 and beyond, what's your outlook on the venture space in MENA as an asset class, as an ecosystem? How do you think it's going to develop with your crystal ball?
my crystal ball, and I don't like to talk about the future because, you know, who knows, but I'm going to venture into this one. The ecosystem is going to come of age now. I mean, this is the time. Beyond 2021, this is the digital economy that we have been promised since the internet came. The first phase of it was post the financial crisis in 2000, the dot-com crash, that is. And then companies died and new companies emerged. And iPhone came in 2007 and took us to the next level. And COVID is, you know, life is going to be pre-COVID, post-COVID. The new normal in the digital landscape is that the digital is normal. This is what today means. When people talk about the new normal is digital. And so, because digital is not fully built, there is so much building to happen. So you'll have all sorts of new investments. I am super optimistic.
And if you had to put any bets on, let's not call it startups, I hate that question, but industries that you think will...
Here, look, EdTech. I mean, it's even starting now. Look at what happened in the US now. Look at Harvard. Harvard announced 2 days ago, only the freshmen are coming in. Only the freshmen. And the rest, all classes are going to be online. Oh my God. You think once you taste it, you want something different? Don't bet on it. This is going to take another 2 years. And in 2 years, trends happen. Habits are formed. And the world is going to change. EdTech, FinTech. So, I mean, I don't need to explain that.
Huge disruption here,
obviously. And look at the regulators. And look at what the regulators are doing. Now they have to catch up. You see, you remember in Saudi Arabia, in the middle of the crisis, said you can't have cash on delivery anymore. And so what does that mean? That means the regulator has to allow digital money to happen. So, I mean, regulators are doing. And look what happened in education in Saudi Arabia. Just 2 weeks ago, Philip, the Saudi Education Ministry said we will approve as an official degree if you have an online digital degree. I mean, you don't need to be in the classroom anymore, right? So look, regulator catching up to startups, catching up to people who want to do things. You follow the citizen, and the citizen is empowered. The citizen is enabled. So e-commerce, obviously. I mean, food, you know, groceries, food tech, cloud kitchens, last mile. I mean, these are all bets. I'm going to. These are no-brainers here.
I'm going to jump into some of the questions, but to play on what you're saying, Kareem asks, can you give your view on hospitality and tourism and the opportunities there in the region?
I'm on the short run. I'm not very optimistic on that. I mean, I am worried about it. It will come back. Obviously, restaurants will come back. Hospitality will come back. I've invested in some of those spaces. I know the pain in them now. There is going to be a new normal there. What does social distancing mean? What does capacity mean? What does food safety mean? They will re-emerge. You know, this is when people have become innovative. When there's pain, you become innovative. You want a new entrepreneurs pop up. You need to think online, offline. You need to think about delivery, not only physical spaces. You pivot. You think about new things. You know, when the weather is fantastic, the captain doesn't do much. When it is very, you know, there is storms, the creativity of the captain and the crew become much more impressive, right? And that's what's happening now. There is disruptive, and you're gonna find people that are gonna do things differently. I don't know what they're gonna look like, but I am betting that you're gonna see all sorts of really, really creative things. Online, offline is going to be very interesting also. Everything has to have an online office. Look at the office space. I mean, I'm looking behind you here. I'm not going to say anything to your own team, but I'll tell my team. I tell my team today, if you want to go, if you're British and you want to live in London for a while, I'm happy. Go work. Give the time. Be productive. If you're comfortable,
So on,
do
on,
what
on
you
this
do.
one, personally, like, so I have this debate all the time. Do you not feel that we somehow miss, though? I'm all for using
Yes,
technology. I'm off, but you miss that engagement and interaction that is
Philip,
extremely important in an office.
you will engage, but you don't have to engage every day. Let's, will you engage in 3 days a week? Will you engage in a smaller office space where
Yeah,
part of the team comes, another part goes? I
yeah,
mean, there is the office people, the real estate space and for commercial office space, better
yeah.
be
That's
very, very, very worried.
yes, yes.
There needs to
We
be a completely different redesign of how
correct.
people think around spaces.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell
Uh,
you, no, I'll give you an example. One big company I was part of, I won't say the name now, is they've discovered the fantastic productivity of their people when they were working from home. No smoking breaks, no office politics.
Starting early.
I'm telling you, I mean, this is serious. And some of them who had tens and tens of people that were doing call centers, they moved their call center to people working from home, and the productivity of the call center of people working from home was superb. So much so that they have actually completely vacated one people. There is no more office. You work from your home. So imagine that.
Let me get some more of these questions in. Manar asks, interesting question, given what you were just saying a little bit earlier. Beyond what do you look for in early stage companies, the more interesting question is, are there new unusual parameters you would be looking for from an early stage company now that you may not have considered previously, say 6 months ago?
Yes, I would, which I had been doing myself. Anybody that comes with an outrageous valuation, and anybody that comes to me and talks about growth, top line, and I am gonna do this. I'm not listening, right? Come back to me and show me. Even though you're very early, I want you to grow. Obviously, I mean, this is your best to grow. But I want to see how, if you are capable to understand how you manage your business, how you view the world when indicators and fundamentals actually matter beyond only revenue.
And so, well, there's interesting. So Mark asks a question though. Do you believe you'll witness a huge valuation disparity between startups benefiting from lockdown and neutral ones? I assume almost
Completely.
naturally. Yeah.
Completely.
But
there is humility, Philip. I need to tell everyone. I'm talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who were a bit, they're all my friends. They'll take that from me. They were arrogant. I am this, I am that. Okay, cool. Right? There is humility now. There is, people are listening more. People are more humble in their expectations. People are asking questions. How do I do this fundamentally? Because I didn't think about fundamentals. I only thought about revenue growth. And now I need to think about different things. So they need to tap into an older guy like me who has been thinking about fundamentals most of his life, right? So how do I make profit? How do I think about that? So it's how do I manage cash flow? I mean, people didn't think about managing cash flow because they would raise money and go spend them. So now there is that, how do I stretch my dollar as much as I can, or my dirham or my guinea, so that it lasts me very long. I mean, that's the beauty of management. That's when you see the leaders versus the people that appreciate and understand what they're doing versus the people that were just a bit of fluff, right?
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But there's so many questions. I want to just send you a few more. Hussam asked an interesting questions. Do you think how do you envisage the future of providing advice for corporate consultations to corporates and governments? Will they accept to be served more remotely now than before, where they used to demand you to come and meet at their offices for meetings?
Well, look, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid just 2 days ago announced that 50% of the government services in the UAE do not want to see your face, nor them seeing, nor you seeing their face. So meaning, Dubai is digitally enabled already. I mean, imagine that everything that you're going to do online. A lot of government services don't require us to be there. Why should we be there? And I think that's where a lot of spending is going to happen. When governments start spending to become digitally enabled, that's when ecosystems also flourish.
Question from an early stage founder saying, what is it that a new founder now who sees an opportunity should think about when building out their proposition given the current environment? Do you have any advice for a first-time early stage founder?
It's not an easy question to answer. What I say here always to anybody is what is relevant. What you're building has to be relevant. It has to be solving a relevant problem to post-COVID. Don't assume business as usual. Don't assume business models as usual. Don't assume all the thinking around how do I value the business, how do I spend my money, how do I talk to my investors. Everything has changed. Think of relevance, think of fundamentals, and think continuously. This is never going to change. Talk about your team and what your team is capable of doing. This is never going to change, but also tell me what you learned in the crisis is essential. I want to know what you learned in this crisis as you're building your relevant company in the next phase.
Kareem asks a question, which is, how is the valuation of company going to be impacted given the manipulation happening in the markets, i.e. the capital markets, to government interventions and quantitative easing? And do you see valuations going up or down in the medium term as a result of that?
Philip, if we're talking our region, this is not, it's not relevant for us, really. I mean, yes, partly it is relevant, but we're still early stage, that we're still not seeing the billions of dollars that we have been having to invested here that gets shifted. We have a trickle of what gets invested outside of our region by people in our region. We just need that trickle to double, right? Did you say how much was the report saying that was invested in the first 6 months?
659. 659, yeah.
I mean, that's a trickle.
It's nothing.
You know, in Israel, it's I'm reading somewhere it's about 2-3% of GDP or something like that. I mean, we're less than 0.5%. We haven't even seen any serious investment in the tech space. So yes, it's important what happens globally, but it's way too early for us to say it's affecting us.
Ned is asking from AWS, what is the role of universities in promoting entrepreneurship post-COVID, given that our region has always favored teaching versus R&D and IP creation? Is there a bigger role for universities?
Universities better watch out for their own existence now, because these young startups are going to disrupt the schooling system and the university system. I think universities need to start thinking about innovation, yes, much more seriously, to think about digital enablement of everyone in their system. A university president cannot think that enabling education online and remote learning is a luxury anymore. If he doesn't do that, people are not going to go to his university. And they need to think about their cost structure, right? One thing Harvard people were asking after the Harvard announcement of online learning is that, am I going to still pay $50,000-$60,000 to attend the university? I mean, that's a big question.
Yep. Two last questions. One, which is quite interesting to get your opinion. How would you assess North Africa's ecosystem compared to the rest of MENA?
It's behind. It's behind in the number of startups. It's behind in the amount of money. It's behind in development and nurturing. It needs to have much more. Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria. So Morocco is a bit more advanced. Tunisia is coming of age, and Algeria is a bit socialist, sorry, and it's closed. And you know, you want to have an ecosystem, you have to have an open and ease of doing business, transfer of money in and out of the country very easily. You want to have foreign investors. You need to have a much more startup-friendly world. I don't see that in North Africa.
Do you think, just before the last one, do you think you'll start seeing more Africa in engagement in MENA and more MENA engagement in Africa, vice versa?
I haven't seen that yet, really. You know, Africa is busy with itself. There's a lot of interesting startups in Africa, specifically in fintech, in last mile, in e-commerce. You know, Nigeria, Kenya, agri-tech is big in some of these countries. There is a lot of edtech. Africa is a very interesting market, and it has a lot of North American interest in investing in it historically. And Europe. So the DFIs, the IFCs of this world, the EBRDs of this world have mandates to invest a lot of money in these markets. We see that in North Africa a bit from the DFIs. We see that in Jordan. We see that in Egypt. But the Gulf needs to rely on its own sovereign money to see that investment coming in.
Thank you, Fadi. Last question, which I reserve to my very own Noor Salama from the team. And she says, what did you both, myself included, and if you allow me, I'll answer it afterwards, learn during this crisis that you didn't appreciate or know beforehand? What was one of your learning lessons?
My learning lessons, look, 2 or 3 things. There were lessons and things that I appreciated. One is that the ecosystem came together. A lot of the investors and the founders became closer together. That was a natural. It's not something I learned. I just observed it now. So it's there. I saw it. People were watching out for each other. I also learned that governments can actually catch up. You know, some regulators woke up and started. It's something good, right? And that founders are going to look at fundamentals. I mean, these are things I expected. I was hoping that they would happen, and they actually happened. So it's lots of good lessons in there. Lots of good lessons.
Thank you. And if you allow me, that really, you know, and I repeat what I said earlier, you are genuinely only as good as your team. And I have been super happy and almost embarrassingly surprised by the effort, the energy, and all of the work that my team has put in during this period to try and work as hard as they have to continue to plow through. And as a founder, you really rely on the backbone of the people that support you, and they've really come through. So I would like to personally take the opportunity to thank them for all of their help and effort, and to all startup founders that probably have teams that are supporting them during this crisis. You really are the multiple of the people that support you. Fadi, genuinely, I'm honored that you were able to join us today. I really appreciate it. I hope that we can catch up soon in person. Please stay safe. And I continue to enjoy these discussions, and in the hope that we can continue to spearhead this ecosystem that you started and developed, and that we can continue to move forwards in the years to come. So thank you very much. And I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Philip. I want to congratulate you again. I love what MAGNiTT does. The things that you're doing for the ecosystem are so essential. The research that you're coming up with is filling a massive gap in the market.
Thank you.
And you and your team, Mabruk, I'm happy for you, and I'm always here for you, whatever you need from me. And good luck to all the founders, entrepreneurs that are listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stay safe. Thank you very much, everybody.